Welcome to The Truth in This Art. I am your host, Rob Lee. And today I have the privilege of being in conversation with the new director of the American Visionary Art Museum, the AVAM, here in Baltimore. Please welcome Jenenne Whitfield.
Thank you so much, Rob. I'm happy to be here.
Happy to have you on here. This is going to be great, and almost as a testament of how long that I've been doing this. That I've done interviews with the introductory director and founder and all, and now with the new founder. So it's like this bridging period. This feels really great. It's really a privilege.
Yeah, it's exciting for me too, I have to say.
So before we get too deep in it, I like to start with a thing that some people might find frightening, but some people are like, tell me more. I can do the whole podcast this way. Tell me the Dr. Jenenne Whitfield story.
Oh my gosh. Well, so I am a doctor of metaphysics, and that is not a PhD. That is a DD, which is Doctor of Divinity. And in essence, first of all, let's just completely take the eraser and erase the whole religious aspect of that. Yeah. And let's focus more on the whole idea of spirituality and it not being as common as most people think. I mean, because I'll give you two little examples that I think would be helpful. If we think about the human anatomy or the human being, we know that we are, in fact, spirit, soul, and body. Yeah. Now, the spirit is first. The soul is second, and the body is third. As human beings, we tend to focus only on the ladder, the lowest rung on that ladder, which is the physical aspect. But we are a whole human being. And so my work in metaphysics just basically deals with those things that are not physical, such as love. Mm-hmm. What color is it? Such as beauty, and within whose eyes, such as justice. We're fighting for it right now. How about equity? What does that look like? These are attributes of powerful, powerful dynamics that we work in every day, but don't really give the thought to as it being a part of spirituality. So therein, the work that I have been doing in the arts, I could not do the way that I have done it if it were not for my study.
And I read that's like, and I have like an interest in that area, so maybe that's a continuing conversation we'll have at another time, because I feel like there may be a book in my studio that says Metaphysics for Dummies. So So in connecting and bridging that to your work, tell me about could you describe like your fascination with art, how it relates to your fascination with art?
Well, actually, herein again lies tipping into the study of metaphysics. Listen, as far as natural and physical is concerned, I was just doing the everyday go to work, climb the corporate ladder thing that everybody in my family thought I should be doing, until I took a wrong turn, or a seemingly wrong turn, down this street called Heidelberg in Detroit, and entered into this explosive, world of color, something like I had never seen before. And that literally changed my life. So now at this point, when I entered or met my, he's my husband now, but at that time when I met the artist Tyree Guyton and turned down Heidelberg Street, I was completely thrown off of my trajectory. And I was thrust into a new way of thinking, a new way of functioning and focusing. And little old me, I just thought, well, I can do something here. And a year later, I gave up corporate America, 14 years, profit sharing, benefits, to help a man build his vision and his dream. Wow. And that has been my work for the last 29 years. And my next move was AVAM. So you can kind of get an indication that I literally the work found me.
Yeah.
And because it was so dynamic, because it was so challenging, because it was so rich, it gave me an opportunity to really put into practice the things that I had been learning.
That's wonderful, and thank you for sharing that and showing those connections. So in this period of 20 plus years at this point, tell me about some of those proudest moments that come to mind, and being in the art world or what have you, and being in these like president and these CEO roles.
Well, I'm the founding director and president of the Heidelberg Project in Detroit. So
Wow.
first of all, I want to say I completely relate to Rebecca Hofberger and, giving birth, incubating something, true innovation. You know what I'm saying? So what allowed me to finally move away after 29 years, that's a long time.
Yes.
And you think most people don't spend that much time in a career, but this is because we're giving birth to something that had never been done before. There was no precedence for it.
Yeah.
Number one. Number two, we're doing it in a world that is not always receptive to innovation by people of color. Number three, we did it in one of the most broken down, beat down areas in Detroit. So we had a lot of cards stacked against us. And so the journey was really about what it would take to get this particular art environment that was attracting people from around the world, that is responsible for what is known as Detroit's arts renaissance today. What would it take to get the powers that be in this city to accept it and it become a part of the cultural fabric of Detroit? And that happened in November of 2021, where Tyree Guyton and myself had been finally, after the project is 36 years old, 29 of those years are mine. But after that length of time, we were granted a Lifetime Achievement Award for that work.
Wow.
If that had not happened, I'm not sure that I would have left. So now it's time to pass the reins, or it's time to hand the reins over to the next generation and step into my next new, if you will, trajectory.
So with that feels like a natural segue to this next question. Tell us about the feeling in coming into the AVAM and, as the second director in its history, tell us about that feeling. And I have some secondary and tertiary bullet points here, but I at least want to start there.
Okay. Well, I did not apply for this job. Someone else put my hat in the ring. So I was not looking for a change or a career change. I wasn't. I felt like the Heidelberg Project would pretty much take me to my grave, as my mother said. But someone put my hat in the ring, and I thought, oh, no, I don't think so. And she said, well, can you just this is the headhunter. She said, can you just send me your credentials? And I did. And then she said to me, would you just do me a favor? And I said, what? She said, would you just visit the museum? And I did. Yeah. And I spent 3 hours in that museum alone because it was closed. And I fell in love. And I'm looking and I'm paying attention to the energy. But what I think was really powerful to me was, again, going back to the metaphysics, paying attention to the serendipitous energy that took place. The design of the American Visionary Art Museum was so similar to a concept that we had in Detroit to build our art center that even Rebecca was blown away. The circular design of AVAM. I have a blueprint of a circular design for our art center that was to happen in Detroit. So that was the first thing. The other thing that was really amazing for me was I stayed in the Royal Sonesta, and I was awakened at 5 a.m. in the morning, and there was a star that was so bright I thought it was a street light. And I was awakened to look and give respect to this bright star that was in the sky off the harbor.
Yeah.
That was the second thing. But then when Rebecca said to me, she said, I knew before she met me now, she said, I knew you were the person for this job from the vibrations of your cover letter.
Wow.
So now all of a sudden I'm thinking, am I going to have a career change? Is this really happening? So it was more of me stepping into and being open to step into change.
Yeah.
When you're not expecting it or when you're not pushing for it, you're allowing what is natural to happen, like flowing with a current. So that's how it happened.
That's great. Yeah, I want to say I always look back at that interview that I did with Rebecca more than a year ago at this point, almost 2 at this point, and just I was kind of looking for footing, right, as to how I was going to do these interviews, and that's the one that was just really a conversation. It just I think it wasn't even any real questions that I have, or maybe the questions became secondary to just having the conversation and trying to pepper it in. And it was funny because she looked up like me. She researched me beforehand, which people rarely do. And she was like, so I read this in your bio. And I was like, wow, that's an old bio. Thank you. And she was like, I looked it up. And it was really funny because I referenced different comedians that I liked and just different things about me. And it felt more like a conversation. And I saw her recently and getting the whole Best of Baltimore and the party there at the AVAM. I was able to see her recently. And, sometimes people don't remember me. I'm very noticeable, but sometimes people don't remember me. And she happened to see me and my partner in the line. And she's like, you two have the greatest smiles. And I was like, oh, it's Rebecca. And it was really cool. It was really cool. And I'm glad that that's part of that experience that you had in coming into this really like great situation, I would imagine. So tell me about coming into a role like Baltimore, and I think different cities have this sort of, when change happens, it's like, all right, what's this change going to look like and things of that nature. How will you make your mark in such a beloved destination while keeping this history and culture like there? Like how we moved forward and innovate while being familiar and staying with the ethos of the AVAM?
That's a really good question, Rob. And I'm going to say this to you. I want to just say that, first of all, people will say things like, well, Baltimore has a lot in common with Detroit. Detroit has a lot in common with Oakland. And I think about these kinds of comments, and I think about them from the perspective of what people are really saying is that we have a high population of African-American people.
Yeah.
And so the landscape of Baltimore doesn't look anything like the landscape of Detroit. And I think, the saying goes that you can put Baltimore, or not Baltimore, maybe, I don't know, but Boston, San Francisco, and one other city in Detroit. It's so big. Wow. Detroit's huge. So the culture is very rich in 2022. Now, this is very interesting and this is dynamic. And I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I will say this. If we research further back than just the last 400 or 500 years, we're going to find that all races of men, colors of men, have had an opportunity to rule dominant in this world.
Right.
And so right now we're seeing a major shift happen in 2022, where what is really starting to dominate is what touches people's soul. And I want you to think about the hip hop culture and the way and how that grew out of, now herein lies more metaphysical principles. That grew up out of chaos, and it grew up out of hardship. It's like a diamond and polishing that diamond. And so now you've got a hip hop culture that has affected the whole world. Somebody, I don't care what their race is, can find something in the hip hop culture that they can relate to. So what is that telling us? That's telling us that somebody found a culture that touches the soul. Yeah. We're moving away from that physical aspect of just being about things, just being about the physical, just being about buildings and hard things, and we're starting to tap into the soul. That's what hip hop did, and it grew up out of hardship.
Yeah.
So that culture is what is permeating all major cities, where you find the richness, and where you find, and others are attracted to it, because you know why? Because everybody has a soul.
Right.
So now you see that is starting to dominate, and we're seeing a shift, a pattern. And when that kind of thing starts to happen, we're going to see a lot of chaos and a lot of fallout from that. Hence our young men being chased and beat down by the police. It's a civil war, so to speak.
Right.
As we move into our next evolution of change. That's what this is really about. So that, to answer your question about keeping the culture and the ethos going, it is how I was able to leave Detroit. I don't own anything, or, I am really a part of this change, and geography is irrelevant. It's a movement, and it's a movement that's happening out of the African American culture, but it is a movement that is touching all cultures.
Thank you. I'm over here kind of like I had to turn the camera off because I'm over here getting like the chills a little bit. I was like, okay, I'm feeling you. I'm feeling you on that. And I think I have a sense of where this next question kind of looks, but because I have a take on it that I read recently, and I was like, oh, race is a piece of this, but I want to get your take on it. What are your thoughts on the term outsider art? Like how that's like dealt with, how it's presented. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, Rob, I don't really subscribe to outsider art as much as I do intuitive or visionary art. Because, there's many terms that people have, scholars or critics have ascribed to this particular art form or this manner of creativity.
Sure.
So the way I see it, though, is that it always starts with the premise that what you're doing is so powerful and so dynamic that you just have to do it.
Yeah.
Now, there can be artists that are trained that feel that strongly about what they do. And there can be artists that are untrained. And when I say trained and untrained, I'm talking about through the academic institutions. Mm-hmm. And there can be another artist or another creative person that can do that work and feel just as strongly and rich about it. Now, who are the people that draw the lines of demarcation? I'm going to tell you a joke. My husband said they're failed artists. So
everyone's a critic, right? It's kind of
they got to justify their existence some kind of way. But I mean, that's funny. But I think people are sincere in the fact that they are trying to make. Mm-hmm. For me, it's really just making lines of demarcation that all boils down to dinero, the money.
Yep.
The money. But what we're talking about, let's go back to the soul. We're talking about something that was so rich when I walked in AVAM and saw the richness of that work and read some of those stories. Hey, You know what I'm saying? But I could probably do that too with an artist who's trained. So in other words, the wheel that I'm rolling with right now is the visionary artists. Those that are called the visionary, the outsiders. That's the wheel I roll with, mostly because my husband, who's an artist in Detroit, he was trained, but he said he wanted to forget everything he learned in exchange for the richness of the lessons his grandfather taught him. So there you have it. Those are my views. I hope that makes sense to you.
No, it does. And, I always look at kind of what I'm doing in this space. Like, there are some people saying, oh, well, this isn't art and this isn't this isn't that. And I'm like, why isn't it? Doesn't it meet this? And having that courage or that desire to create and to help facilitate in storytelling or do this with a more artistic mentality, like there is a lot of erasing, if you will, and those imperfections and all of these different things that in all of these interviews that I do with artists, that I'm hearing that overlap. And there's a curatorial component to, I'm not talking to everyone. I'm very intentional of who I talk to and how I want to talk to them, but definitely feeling like an outsider and not going to like a media school or something like that. And my degree is in business, and really trying to pursue this out of my own like interest and desire. And as I was sharing with you before we got started, that this was something that I was like, this needs to be heard. And I don't really care what comes out of it, but this needs to be heard. That's what was driving it, and having that desire to share a story and talk with interesting people. I think, being able to talk with interesting people makes me feel a little bit more interesting. It's like, oh yeah, ask you some interesting questions.
Yeah, that's powerful. And I think that's what's true for me. I mean, I was going through the humdrum every day, going to work at the in the banking industry. I was so bored. I would move from position to position. I think I had like 7 or 8 positions in that 14 years. And but then when I turned on Heidelberg Street and met Tyree and got into this world of art, when I would stand on stages and give talks or lectures, I would say I've had butterflies in my stomach for 20 years, 25 years, or however many years. And that is a place of magic.
Mm-hmm.
You see?
Yeah.
And if we deny that, then we are only existing. We're not living.
100%. And I had an interview earlier today where I told the guest, I was like, I'm just shy, right? And he was just like, no, you're not. And I was like, oh, in this capacity, I'm so very confident in what I do. But if it's like, hey, get on stage and do a speech or do a presentation for like businesses, it's like, nah, I got nothing for you. But my energy kind of pops, when I'm doing this thing that I'm so invested in and so comfortable with. So 100%. I'm all aboard.
And Rob, I have to tell you, see, now I'm looking right at you, and I feel that soulfulness in what you do. So, I mean, and you can also tell when a person is stoic and they're just frozen in something that they do where there's no passion. There's really no real love. They're just existing. They're just going through the motions. Now, what concerns me is now how we reach our young people and help them to discover their voices in a world that seems to have gone mad,
Yeah, that's, there are a few opportunities, and I'll say a few months ago, I had the opportunity to go back to my high school, and it hadn't been there like 20 years. So, and I realized that in the middle of speaking with some of the students there, I was like, I haven't been here since, 2003. And I thought about it, I was like, most of you were born after 2004. I am old. That was literally what popped in my head. And just really trying to get across a point, but also not, being old man podcast and like, hey, your creativity matters in this way, but really impressing upon them that it's important for you just to have the courage and the desire to create and then make those mistakes, do that play, but figure out what that path might look like for you and avoid those trends or what have you, unless it's really interesting to you and try to make your own lane and have the courage to do that. Because, when I look at starting this, I used to hear some of the goofiest things of, oh, you're a podcaster, you do fake radio, you talk to yourself on a microphone, you live in your mom's basement. And now it's a huge industry. So it's really weird. It's like Bo Derek and cornrows, but hey, what do I know?
That's funny.
So I got 2 more real questions for you before I hit you with these rapid fire questions.
Sure.
I want to talk about creative perfectionism, like in the time you've spent in the art world or what have you, and observing and being married to an artist. Tell me about like how like that perfectionism like impacts their work, whether for better or for worse. I hear about painters all the time that they aren't really done with the painting. They kind of just stop. They're always painting. And I used to be that way with doing a podcast, doing the soundscaping and such. Let me remove every and I would realize I'm losing something of the energy of that conversation. So tell me about that.
Well, I think that has to do with control. We're control freaks. And we need to learn how, seriously, we need to learn how to let go. And I'm just telling you now about it because at this particular stage in my life, I'm just now starting to catch on to it. So, but I do think that there are two things that come to mind. One is my husband would often quote Picasso, who talked about we have to, when we lose our childlike quality, we lose the magic. That's the first thing. The second thing is when I was first introduced to the Heidelberg Project, my husband said, "Will you help me?" And I said, "No, because I don't understand what you're doing." And he said, "Can I perform an experiment?" So he gave me paint, paper, pencils, and sat me on the floor like a child. And then he blindfolded me and said, "Now paint what you see." Okay. That painting that I created from that experiment follows me wherever I go. And I called it courage, because in that I had no physical eyes to see. And so I had to come from, here we go again, a place of the soul.
Yeah.
And that was so dynamic. But in essence, when an artist, to me, when they say a painting is never done, they're striving for something that they will really never achieve, because it's not about real perfection. It's about their control. Yeah. Ain't no perfect nothing except, it just is. And we just move in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a perception. That's my point. It's a perception.
Yeah, totally. I agree with that. So the last question I have here, and I think we're speaking in general terms here. Do you think creativity is something that people are innately born with, because that notion of children are creating and things of that nature, or is it something that it's generally just curated? I mean, cultivated rather through education, through experience, or is it somewhere in between?
No, for me, it's innate. It's in there. Case in point, Rob, again, Heidelberg taught me so much, and it really just blew up my metaphysics. When I graduated high school, the role, my sister and I had a plan. We'd go into the Air Force together on the buddy system, and it blew up. So I had to come back home, and she went ahead to do 4 years. And that was my first poem I wrote, called Fright, because all of a sudden our plan, I'm just a young girl, just 18 years old, the plan blew up. And so I wrote this poem. But then I listened to people, and they said, "Well, just go on, get in school, get you a good job." I did all those things. So I wrote my first poem at 18, and my next 300 after I met Tyree Guyton and turned down Heidelberg Street.
Wow.
There's the proof. So I am living proof of the transformative power of authentic creativity that comes from a place of the soul. And it's in every one of us. Going back to Picasso's statement, when we lose that childlike quality and we start becoming scripted, we start becoming curated, we lose some of the magic. Now, we can get by, but is there real love and happiness out of that? Or is it you just existing?
We're really good at faking it at times.
Yeah.
And I like to ask that question of, how does one tap back into that childlike energy to create and that sensibility? Because there are so many different things that happen. I wanted to be, when I was younger, this is ridiculous, I wanted to be a comic book artist and an astronaut at the same time. Like, I don't know how it's going to happen. It's just like a lot of drawings of the moon. It's fine. And, but that's what I was into. And that's what my interests were. And I think, however grand it might be, there's no no's when you're younger, like at least in your own head. And as you get older, there's, I think, all of this sort of chatter and noise around you. Oh, you shouldn't do that, or you got to do something that's sensible, and da. And I think that there is a fair amount of courage, and maybe coupled with some fear, when it comes to pursuing art as a lifestyle, as a career, because I think the courage is to create, and the fear is, what if this doesn't go well? What if I can't make rent? Or what if people don't like my work? Or what if I stop liking my work?
That's very true, Rob. And I'll tell you something, though. There's a group of people, a group of young people that are already stepping into that they're fumbling along the way,
Mhm.
but that's what's happening. It's that shift that I was talking about, where people are saying, like, look at what happened after COVID. People didn't go back to their regular jobs. A lot of
True.
people started to do their own thing, and they're like, I can bake cupcakes and sell them, or I can, and then, so now we've got this shortage in the workforce.
Mhm.
So just pay attention. We see what's happening. And what I'm telling you now is that people are starting to live more from the level of the soul. But what's happening is there's a lot of fallout as a result of that. But we're on the move, darling. We're getting ready to do some real dynamic humanitarian types of shifts.
Yeah.
And it's very powerful.
It's wonderful. And I think that's the spot where we'll stop on the real questions. I think that's really good. And I want to dive into a couple of these rapid fire questions. They're brief questions. Brevity is key here. Don't overthink them. Don't overthink them. People get caught on peanut butter sometimes. There's a peanut butter question in here that'll knock your socks off. In moving here, transplanted to Baltimore, so Baltimore isn't necessarily home for you, but you did touch on this idea of locality. You're irrespective of that. How do you bring the concept of home with you? Like, how do you describe home, and how do you bring that concept of home with you?
I got to tell you, it goes straight to the heart. The things that I have accomplished and done are with me, in my soul, and then I can take that anywhere.
That's great. What is your favorite lazy night dinner?
Oh, favorite lazy night dinner?
Some people are like, I want ramen, and other people are like, hey, I got these microwavable burritos, and it's just like, it's been a long day. I need to eat something, but I don't have like a couple hours to roast a chicken.
It's probably gonna be a kind bar. I'm gonna be honest, because if I gotta even cook it, it's a problem. It's gotta be something I can open and pop in my mouth and feel a little satisfaction. There it is, a kind bar.
I like kind bars. I'm a big fan of that. What is it? The dark chocolate and the sea salt one?
Yeah.
It's a good one. It slaps. What's your favorite color?
Here I go. I love peacocks. All those colors in the peacock's feathers just turn me on. But I love color in general. I don't have a favorite. I just don't.
I dig it. Mine's usually gray, and I was like, it's just neutrality right there in front of you. What is the last movie you watched?
Oh, the last movie I watched again was Forrest Gump.
Okay, it's classic.
It is. The message, though, is profound.
Yes.
Yeah. There is that childlike quality.
Yes, right. So this is the last one, and I always get interesting answers on this one. What is your if you're at AVAM, there's this thing. It's like, hey, we need to get Dr. Jenenne on here. We need her to do a karaoke song. What song are you performing?
Oh my gosh, I'm going to probably perform this stupid, crazy song by Marlena Shaw that's ancient in the 70s called Go Away Little Boy. Because I still know all the words. I have a wicked sense of humor, but I still know all the words to that crazy song. That's it.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. It's always those ones that you're like, I remember all of these lyrics. Like, why do I remember each one of those? Like this morning, what was it? I was walking back from getting coffee, and I just suddenly started singing the lyrics from Whitney Houston's So Emotional. And I was like, wow, why do I know all of these lyrics? I was like, I just learned this song like last year, even though it's been out forever, obviously. But, it's just certain things that are knowledge gaps for me. And I was like, wow, I remember these lyrics. I mean, I must have listened to this song a lot.
Yeah. Well, you're going to have to look that one up. Yum, Go Away Little Boy by Marlena Shaw, because she's doing rap in the first part of the song. She's running her mouth. She's talking first. So it was before rap was even... I'm telling you, it's crazy.
I'm gonna look it up.
Yeah.
So with that, that's pretty much all of the questions that I had for this afternoon. Well, this afternoon. And I want to invite and encourage you to tell the listeners where they can check out the AVAM, the social media, in person, all of that good stuff. The floor is yours.
Oh, well, thank you so much for that, Rob. I want to first off say that we just mounted our newest exhibition called Abundance, Too Much, Too Little, Just Right. And that opened last Friday. So I'm hoping that people come out and see this wonderful exhibition that was curated by this was really Rebecca's protege, mentee, Gage, and I'm going to blow his last name. I know you know it. It starts with a B, and I'm not sure how to pronounce it. But anyway, come and see that show. It's amazing. And then on the 19th, that's our gala, where November 19th, we're going to have a celebration, an annual celebration that is really to introduce me to the Baltimore community, which I really appreciate. But we're also going to have music and dancing, and we're honoring the Honorable Jamie Raskin.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, that's our grand visionary honoree, the Honorable Jamie Raskin. And yes, Gage, say that name again for me.
Branda?
Branda. Yeah, that's him. He's a wonderful man because I spent time with him, but I have a little bit of a problem sometimes in pronouncing names I'm uncertain of, but it is actually Branda. That's right. So thank you for that. And I hope you clean that up for me.
I will. Absolutely, I will.
All right. So, but yeah, it's been fun.
Thank you. So I guess I'll wrap up there. That was that's great, and thank you for sharing those details of what's on the forefront and what's on the horizon. And I'm Rob Lee for Jenenne Whitfield of the AVAM, the American Visionary Art Museum, the new director of the American Visionary Art Museum, and we're saying that there's art in and around Baltimore. You just got to look for it.